Can a Catholic celebrate Halloween?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy. Would you like to elaborate on that at all?
Well, I mean, in the first place, okay, so we can talk about what Halloween is. And as people may know, the even the name Halloween is an abbreviation of the phrase All Hallows Eve. And so that leads to another question for many English speakers, at least speakers of contemporary English, which is what is a hallow? And here we're not thinking of an app.
Oh, yeah.
Instead, we're thinking of something else. So the word hallow in a verb form comes up in the most famous Christian prayer of all time, at least in its English translation. What do we say there?
Hallowed.
Hallowed,
Be
yeah,
thy name.
hallowed be thy name. And what does that mean? What are we asking God to do?
Oh, that's a good one, Jimmy. Hallowed be thy name.
It is a good idea if you're asking God to do something to know what you're asking him to do.
Yeah, that's. I don't think I was quite prepared for this. Darn it! Can we just do this next year? Can we just take a year off?
Yeah, sure, fine with me.
I suppose that means that his name be made holy or thought holy or
treated as
treated
holy.
holy.
Yeah. And so that tells us what the basic concept of hallowedness is, holiness.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you can even hear how hallow sounds like holy, just a little vowel change. And so a hallow is someone who's holy. And so another word for holy, if now holy comes from Germanic roots, because English has this weird double vocabulary. It's a Germanic language, so it has lots of German roots. But then back in the year 1066, the French invaded England and conquered it, and that introduced lots of French words into English as well. And French is a Romance language, so it's derived from Latin, and so it introduced a lot of Latinate words into English, and we also had Latinate words coming in through church influence because the church used Latin a lot. So we tend to have this double vocabulary in English, which is not characteristic of most languages, where we can describe the same thing either using a word that derives from German or a word that derives from Latin. So, Psychelid, if you were to say holy in another way using a Latinate word, a word from Latin, what word would you pick?
Like
And
something
if you
like
don't know, I'll help you out. But
sanctified or something like. I might pick a word.
yeah, well, just holy. Or if you were to say holy one or holy person using a Latinate
Saint.
word, what word? Saint. Yeah. So All Hallows Eve is the eve of All Saints Day, and All Saints Day is a major liturgical feast on the calendar. In fact, in ordinary years, it's a holy day of obligation. And so Catholics definitely should celebrate All Saints Day, and that can extend over into the evening before to celebrate the eve of All Saints Day. So there's no problem with Catholics celebrating Halloween. That's a totally good thing to do. The question is, how are you celebrating it? And there are some ways that are better than others. Obviously, one can commemorate the saints in various ways. And since that's the purpose of All Saints Day, that's a good way to do it. But there's also a cultural aspect to Halloween that started basically in the Anglosphere, in the English-speaking world, in the British Isles, including Ireland, and then it came to America, where it kind of transformed a little bit, and then it spread all over the world. So we have this secularized version of Halloween parallel to the religious version. And there's nothing wrong in principle with having a secular celebration that's parallel to a religious celebration, as long as you're not doing anything wrong. But in this case, there are people who suspect, the pop culture celebration of Halloween is demonic because it's always demons. And anything scary is obviously demons. And so dressing up like scary figures like firemen and doctors and nurses and superheroes, that's got to be demonic because, I mean, Cy Kellen, aren't you scared of firemen and doctors and nurses and superheroes?
Terrified. Actually, I was expecting to ask something else. No, those people don't scare me at all.
Oh, okay. Well, what about in that case, having skeletons around and jack-o'-lanterns and things like that?
Yeah, a little marginally more scary.
Marginally, yeah. Not too bad though.
No.
Now there are some ways one could celebrate the cultural version of Halloween that, I would be much cooler towards. Like if someone wants to dress up as the devil, I'm not a big fan of the devil. So, and I understand a lot of people could have a problem with that. But merely dressing up as something scary, whether it's a policeman or a nurse or a skeleton or whatever, merely dressing up as something that's scary or having scary imagery around is something that deserves a little bit of further study. Let's think about the Bible for a minute. Now, in the Bible, are there scary things?
Yeah, like Herod.
Yeah, like King Herod. Okay, good example.
Yeah.
King Herod's a good example. Also, there's, the beast in Revelation. There's the dragon in Revelation. There's even the devil in the Bible.
Right.
And there are all kinds of battles, and battles are scary, and there's plagues. There's a lot of scary stuff in the Bible. Now, can you, and of course that means we should never, ever make movies or TV shows or have stage plays about the Bible, right?
No, we should do those things.
I
hate to contradict
we should.
you. Yes.
We should.
Yes.
Oh, okay. But the Bible has scary parts in it, and it would require someone, if you did a complete adaptation of the Bible, whether it's an audiobook or a stage play or a TV show or a movie series or whatever, if you have someone reading the text of the Bible, they've got to say the lines of Herod.
Right.
And they've got to say the lines of the devil. And they have to say, crucify him. And they have to say a bunch of stuff that bad people did. Surely that is wrong, Cy Kellett, to say things that bad people said.
We say them in church, Jimmy.
Pretend to be bad people?
We do it on Palm Sunday.
Oh,
we say all those things.
There can be redeeming reasons then why one could dress up and act scary, even though we're not doing it sincerely. We're not sincerely being evil. We're just play acting.
Yeah, right.
So there can be reasons like education and spiritual commemoration and remembering things. Well, okay, let's see if we can think of any reasons, any additional reasons why one could dress up or act in a scary way. How about drama? Because if you're doing something dramatic, there has to be dramatic tension. There have to be stakes involved, meaning emotional, dramatic stakes. And so if you're gonna enact a dramatic scenario, now I've never seen My Little Pony. My impression is the dramatic stakes are pretty low on My Little Pony, although maybe some bronies could correct me. But certainly in most drama, there have to be bad people doing bad things, at least pretending to do bad things, because drama isn't real, and so dramatic scenarios involve people play acting. And if you're going to put on a dramatic scenario, you need to have someone play the bad guy. Somebody's got to be the bad guy, whether the bad guy's a monster or an axe murderer or a criminal or whatever it is. You need that dramatic tension, and somebody has to play that part. Okay, and as a result, Now, you'll notice one word that keeps coming up in what I've described thus far is the word play, as in play acting.
Right.
And you can have stage plays, but play is a universal human phenomenon. It's so universal that kids do it spontaneously. Now, back in my day, they might, and I don't, this is, who knows what today's standards are. But back in my day, kids would play cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians or things like that that pit two groups in opposition to each other. And that's where the dramatic conflict came from. In the case of cops and robbers, you know, most people would agree the cops are the good guys and the robbers are the bad guys. But even in these scenarios, we have dramatic tension with groups in opposition, with some people playing the bad guy and acting scary and pretending to do things they shouldn't, even though they're not really doing them. It's part of the drama of play, including among children. And it's not even just human children that play. If you look at puppies, they play. If you look at kittens, they play. If you look at all kinds of animals, their offspring play. So why do human children play and puppies play and kittens play and other offspring of animals play? There must be some purpose that God built in to play if it is such a universal phenomenon among God's creatures. So if you had to take a guess, and I'll tell you the answer if you guess wrong or if you guess right, what is the purpose of play? Why does God want the offspring of different creatures of his to play?
I've got
what benefit does it confer?
My one-word answer: practice.
Practice, yes. You see, I have answered this question for you before. Practice is what play lets people do. And so kittens and puppies play fight because it's a safe way of getting practice for fights for real that they will be in as adult dogs and cats. And so in order to get ready for those real fights as adult dogs and cats, they need to get practice by playing in a safe way, or largely safe way, with each other when they're young. And the same impulse is what drives human boys in particular to play, because men are configured for battle, and in a way that women aren't, although women can certainly step in and help in battles. And, you know, there are no men, it falls to the women to defend, you know, the family and larger groups and so forth. But men in particular in the human species are configured for battle. And so in order to get ready for battles that they may have to fight as men, boys need to get practice play fighting, just like dogs and cats do. Okay, well, that's not limited to human offspring, though, because notice human adults also play. They may play sports, which it also involves, you know, competition and conflict between different people, but in a safe way or largely safe way. They may not play sports. They may do stage plays. They may read novels. They may watch TV shows, even Lifetime movies. They consume fiction, and all forms of fiction involve drama, which shows us that drama helps even human adults emotionally process and practice for situations where dramatic stakes would be involved in real life. You know, like if you watch a Lifetime movie about a husband and wife going through a rough patch and then they get back together, that can help you, if you're a woman or if you're a man, you know, be prepared to face a situation where you and your spouse might have a rough patch that you need to get through on your way to reconciliation. And there are numerous other ways that fiction prepares us, even if we never confront the exact thing we've consumed fiction about, it still helps prepare us in various ways to confront potentially difficult or dangerous situations in the future. So play, including drama, including people pretending to be scary or do bad stuff, is actually an impulse that God built into human nature, and it has a legitimate function of helping us get ready for things we might have to face in the future. So there is no problem if you want to dress up as a super scary individual, like, a policeman or a nurse or a fireman or even an axe murderer. If you want to do that for Halloween and that's one form of play you want to engage in, it's not automatically wrong. Neither is it automatically wrong to do things like trick or treat. I mean, you shouldn't really do tricks on people, but if you want to go around to people's doors and get treats from them, even high carbohydrate treats, those are okay as long as you're not eating high sugar treats every day. And if you need, take your insulin first or whatever. But when you look at the different activities associated with the cultural celebration of Halloween, none of them are intrinsically wrong. Like I said, there are some things I wouldn't recommend. Like if I had children, I wouldn't let them dress up as devils. But, I wouldn't have a problem with them dressing up as saints or even as secular things. If one of them wanted to be a monster, like a skeleton or something like that for Halloween, one year I was a mummy when I was a kid. Another year I was a Dracula. I don't have a problem with this in principle. So I would say that Catholics can celebrate Halloween, either the religious version of it or the cultural version of it, or both, as long as you apply sensible principles to the celebration and don't just indulge anything.
Charlie's in the studio. He's going to be a window washer for Halloween. He is very relieved. He said, I hope Jimmy says yes, because I don't have to get rid of my window washer outfit. You're okay, Charlie. All right, we'll take a quick break. Right back with Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
You remember Rocky Balboa? If somebody said, "Yo, Rocky, man, you the Rock," like you would have caught the rather cheesy verbal play on words quite easily. And that's exactly what Jesus does. So he uses the word Petra in Greek as feminine. He masculinizes it, Petros, to make it refer to a masculine person. And so it's as if Jesus said, "Yo, Rocky, you the Rock."
Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders. Tonight, 11 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Jimmy Akin, our guest, Catholic Answers Live. Ask me anything, 888-318-7884. Every single line full. So we'll start in New York City. New York City. Frank in New York City. Thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you very much. I was told to call in today because Jimmy was going to be the host.
Okay.
Or guest, but either way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, but many years ago, I'd say in the 1990s, I was listening to a radio talk show. I believe it was on a Protestant station. And a woman wrote a book on George Washington. And it was very interesting. She was expounding on him. And before the show was over, she said, many people don't know this, but before George Washington actually passed away, he converted to Catholicism and he became a Catholic. And I says, wow, that's pretty interesting. Now, about 6 months later, I think it might have been on the same show, there was another woman on, and she wrote a book on Washington too. And they asked her the same question. They said that we heard that he became a Catholic. She said, well, I have not delved into that aspect of his life. You know, it was just more like military and everything. She says, I really don't know. I couldn't tell you either way. So all these years I have been laboring over trying to find out what the truth is about George Washington and Catholicism.
Jimmy, can you give him that?
Okay, well, during his lifetime, George Washington, you know, he was from Virginia, and the majority denomination in Virginia at the time was Episcopalianism. And during his lifetime, my understanding is George Washington was an Episcopalian, although he also had deistic leanings. And deists are people who believe in God, but they don't really necessarily have Christian convictions. They may be members of Christian churches, but they don't necessarily have traditional Christian beliefs. And a lot of the founding fathers in America were deists. And my understanding is that George Washington himself had deistic leanings. But all that's during the bulk of his life. We're not talking about his deathbed. And before the American colonies seceded from British control, Episcopalianism had a different name. It was known as Anglicanism, or the church. People were members of the Church of England. But if you're breaking away from the Church of England, if you're seceding from the Church of England, you probably don't want to continue to say, oh, yeah, we're members of the Church of England, but we just threw off the shackles of our British overlords. Apologies to our former British overlords. No offense intended. But you still probably don't want to say, oh, yeah, we're members of the Church of England here, when you've just fought a war against England and liberated yourself from their control. Well, so that led to a search for some new branding for the Church of England or Anglicanism in America. And they said, well, what else characterizes our church besides England that we could use for branding purposes? And they said, oh, well, we have an Episcopal structure. We've got bishops. And so they renamed themselves the Episcopalian Church. That's what many of them did. But if you've just thrown off the shackles of your British overlords, you might want to have a deeper think about all this. I mean, if you just threw off the British government and you saw a reason to do that, you might want to think about, well, hey, wait, was this Church of England thing a good idea in the first place? And so it could be natural to reconsider whether one maybe should throw off the Episcopalianism too, and maybe go back to the church that Episcopalianism or the Anglican Church originally came from. In other words, undo the Reformation and go back to the Catholic Church. So there's not an implausibility to the idea that in the wake of the American Revolution, someone like George Washington, who had grown up and been an Episcopalian, might want to rethink this issue and possibly become Catholic again. There's more to the story, and we'll get to it on the other side of the break.
Frank, thank you very much for this question, with lots more questions with Jimmy Akin. On Catholic Answers Live, it's an Ask Me Anything, and you can ask whatever you want. 888-31-TRUTH.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Throughout history, some Catholics have been among the worst kind of villains, right? Or were they? In Cancelled, historian Steve Weidenkopf digs into the lives and controversies of some of these Catholics whose reputations have been blackened, often unfairly. He takes on the anti-Catholic versions of history and defends not only these figures, but the faith they represent. Order your copy of Cancelled today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
Catholic Answers Live, a little bit of groovy music for you. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Frank on the line. It's Ask Me Anything, and Frank is on the line from New York City with a pretty straightforward question. Did George Washington have a deathbed conversion to Catholicism? Jimmy, you were in the midst of an answer when we had to go to the break.
Yeah, so I'd mentioned that it would be unreasonable for a figure like George Washington to reconsider, do I want to still be a member of Episcopalianism, which is derived from the Church of England after you've just led the American colonies in a war against England? And one could reevaluate the situation and say, I should go back to Catholicism. And there are rumors that that's what happened, that on his deathbed, he had some of his slaves go get a Catholic priest, a Jesuit, to come and speak with him shortly before he died. He was on his deathbed at the time. And he had been known to be at least somewhat friendly to Catholics before this. Like when he had, during the Revolutionary War, he had learned about some of his troops celebrating Guy Fawkes Day, which is a British holiday on the 5th of November, in which they commemorate the gunpowder plot in other ways, or at least historically have, by burning the Pope in effigy. Mm-hmm. And he put a stop to that. He didn't want Protestant Yahoo troops, fracturing the alliance of the different colonies, because like you got people from Maryland, that was a Catholic state. And if you've got an army of people and some of them are burning the Pope in effigy to celebrate Guy Fawkes Day, it's just gonna not be a morale multiplier for your troops. It can cause schisms and problems among your troops. So he put a stop to that. He also reportedly had a picture of the Virgin Mary in his home in his room at Mount Vernon, and that's something that at least at the time many Protestants would not have had. So he did have there had been some indications of at least friendliness towards Catholics and Catholic ideals. And according to some of the stories, he summoned a Catholic priest who then heard his confession and then baptized him conditionally and received him into the Catholic Church. The problem is that these claims are difficult to support historically. The earliest reference to them I know is from 1883. And that's way after George Washington's death. And so anytime you have a historical claim and there's a massive gap between when the event allegedly occurred and the first written record of it, that's a big sign that this claim may not be true. It may just be a product of the rumor mill. And you can certainly see how Catholics who historically, even up into the 1960s, were a despised minority in America by mainstream American culture. There was even problems with John Kennedy's election because some people thought it would be the equivalent of electing the Pope. Well, given the historic hostility to American culture, you can easily see how Catholics would want to be able to claim the nation's first president and one of its most popular presidents for the Catholic Church. That would be a great story. Hey, before he died, he became one of us, so you shouldn't be so that makes us feel good, and also you guys shouldn't despise us so much. But the historical evidence for this actually happening in there, it looks like it's just rumors. Also, in addition to being an Episcopalian, George Washington was also a Mason. He was a Freemason, and he had a Masonic funeral. And since the Catholic Church had already condemned Freemasonry, it would be less plausible that he converted to the Catholic Church and then had a Masonic funeral. Now, it's not impossible for that to happen, especially if his final wishes were not properly understood, but it's at least less plausible to say he converted to the Catholic Church on his deathbed and then had a Masonic funeral than to say, well, he didn't convert on his deathbed. That's just a rumor. And he had a Masonic funeral, as you would expect, given his previous involvement in the Masonic Lodge.
Frank, I hope that was the help you were looking for. I'm going to keep going because we've got every single line full, but thank you for the call, Frank. We're going to our friend Emma in Hayden, Idaho, but the call's coming from Costa Rica. So why'd you flee the country, Emma?
I didn't know Hayden was in Costa Rica.
She's usually in Hayden.
In Costa Rica.
No. You're all right, though. No trouble with the law.
No trouble with the law.
All right. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, I got to tell you something. We were in a Lutheran church. We lived in California, and we had All Saints Week, and Cody wanted to be a mummy, and so I dressed him up like that, and he was Lazarus. And I said, "When you see Pastor Paul lie down on the ground, and on cue, Pastor Paul said, 'Lazarus, get up.'"
Ah.
And the next year, there were like a half dozen Lazaruses.
Everyone wanted to play.
Yeah. Anyway, if he was a Pharisee, I thought he had to be married to be a Pharisee.
You know what, Emma, you're breaking up. So I'm gonna. I heard it, but Jimmy. So she wants to know. It says Paul was a Pharisee, and Pharisees, she's saying, had to be married. So doesn't that mean Paul would have had to be married?
No, Pharisees didn't have to be married. It's not like they required you to be married before you could, adopt Pharisee views. There were individuals in first century. Now, marriage was the custom, and it was expected that under ordinary circumstances, a Jewish man is going to be married. In fact, they married quite young by our standards. But it was viewed as a religious obligation to marry because God had said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And if you're a persecuted minority in the Roman Empire, like Jewish people were, you want a bunch more Jews to help, bolster the strength of your community. So it was regarded as a religious duty, but it could be superseded by other religious duties, like devoting oneself to God or the study of the Torah. And there were individuals who remained single, some of them for spiritual reasons, and we have a variety of records of such individuals, including among Pharisees. There were some who were regarded as being married to the Torah. They're devoting their life to the study of the Torah rather than having the divided time sharing they'd have to do if they had a biological family. And so there were individuals who remained single for religious reasons. And the evidence would seem to indicate that St. Paul was one of them, because we don't have a mention of him having a wife. We know during his Christian ministry he did not have one. He talks to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians about this, and that letter was written about AD 53, let's say. And so he clearly was single then. It's possible he could have been married earlier and then become widowed. But we don't have any evidence of that having happened. So it's also quite possible that he was one of these individuals who remained single in order to devote himself fully to God and what he perceived God's work to be.
Emma, I'm going to leave it there because it was breaking up quite a lot by the end of the call. So I hope you have a good time down there, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again. Mary is in Rapid City, South Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. Glad to have you here, Mary. Go ahead with your question. Mary, I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
There's parts in the Bible that say your sins will be forgiven, white as snow, and they'll be totally forgotten. But then yet we meet Judgment Day when everything we did is going to be brought forth and we have to answer to the things we've done.
Mm-hmm.
So why and how do we, I guess, just come to terms with that?
Okay, well, there are a few aspects to this question. The first one let's deal with is the I will remember your sins no more stuff about God forgetting our sins. Cy Kellett can help us out with this one. Cy Kellett, is it literally possible for God to ever forget anything? So can he go into his memory and cut stuff out?
Metaphysically impossible.
Right.
God
it's
cannot
metaphysically impossible, one, because he's omniscient and knows everything, and he would cease to be omniscient if he cut out part of what he knew. And second, because God is outside of time and eternal, and therefore he can't change. So he couldn't know something at one time and then cease to know it later on. So when we encounter that, I will remember your sins no more language, that's metaphorical. It means God's not going to hold our sins against us. He's going to forgive us. It's just another way of saying that he's going to forgive us. So then let's talk about the relationship between forgiveness in this life and Judgment Day. And here I'm going to tap Cy Kellett for a little additional help. Now, one punishment that people fear in the Christian age when they have committed sins is going to hell. That's sometimes called the eternal punishment of sins. But is, Cy Kellett, that the only kind of punishment that people ever have to worry about?
No.
No. What's the other one called?
Temporal.
Temporal punishment. Temporal means not eternal in this context. So if you go to hell, you stay there forever, that's an eternal punishment because it goes on forever. But in temporal punishments, they affect things for a time. And this was actually the dominant form of concern in the Old Testament before the afterlife came into clear focus the way it does in the New Testament. People were concerned about, if you sin, you're going to get sick, or you're going to lose a military battle, or things here in time are going to go bad for you. Well, since we have these two types of punishment that, can result from sin, how do we understand the idea of forgiveness? If you had a sin that Cy Kellett, that was a mortal sin,
yes,
so it cost you your spiritual life, you would go to hell. And if you didn't have that sin forgiven, what would happen to you?
In hell? If I didn't?
If you didn't have a mortal sin forgiven, what would happen to you?
I would go to hell.
You'd go to hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so let's suppose you have your mortal sins taken care of. So all of the eternal punishment for your sins has gone away, does that automatically mean that you're never going to have to suffer any consequences here in time for what you did?
No, it does not mean that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
It doesn't. And there are bunches of passages in the Bible that indicate that even when we've been forgiven of the eternal consequences of our sins, we may still have to face some temporal consequences. The book of Hebrews discusses this, and it points out that in contrast to our earthly parents, who disciplined us as children however it seemed good to them, God disciplines every child he receives for that child's own good, so that they will grow in holiness. And consequently, even though we've been forgiven as children of God of the eternal consequences of our sins, we may still have to face some consequences here in time, or at least that won't affect us forever. And those will be taken care of, assuming you die well before Judgment Day. Those will all be taken care of before Judgment Day. But for people who die at the end of the world, they may have to deal with some of those consequences on Judgment Day itself. So that's a kind of general sketch of the situation, Mary. Does that give you what you need, or would you like a little bit more?
No, it does, but it just seems that you'd have to put it in lay terms.
Oh,
well,
it's confusing.
Yeah, to
Okay.
put it in lay,
Like
to
I'm
put
trying
it
to
in.
explain it to my grandkids.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know we were explaining it to grandkids, but to put it in grandkid mode, and I don't know the age of the grandkids, but I would say that God will forgive us the eternal results of our sins, so we won't go to hell, but he does still allow us to have some bad results from our sins to help us grow. And for people who are alive at the end of the world, that growth will occur for them on Judgment Day. So there will be a future judgment, and if you're at that judgment, God will say, and you've already been forgiven, God will say, okay, this person is forgiven of all the bad stuff they did, and they don't need to grow anymore, so I'm letting them into heaven right now. Or God will look at what a forgiven person does and say, okay, they're forgiven, but they still need to do a little bit of growing, so I'm going to help them grow right now. Or an unforgiven person, unfortunately, God's going to say, yeah, they did all this stuff and it's bad and they rejected forgiveness, so they didn't want to spend eternity with me, so they'll spend eternity separate from me.
Okay, Mary?
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. Thanks very much. We got to take a break. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
The EWTN radio listener comment line is open right now for you. If you've got a question or comment about what you hear on EWTN radio, we'd love to hear it. Call 205-795-5773. We'd also like to know how our programming has impacted your life or the life of someone you know. That number again, 205-795-5773. And thank you for listening to EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Wayne is in Middletown, Ohio. I'm not exactly sure where that is in Ohio, but I think I can guess. Wayne?
Somewhere near the middle.
You would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah. El Centro is not in the center of California, though.
No, that's true. It's just in the center of the valley. I think so. Maybe that's with Middletown. I don't know. Wayne, where's Middletown?
It's situated roughly in the middle of Dayton and Cincinnati.
Oh, so it's in the middle of two major cities. All right. Thanks, Wayne. You got a question for us, or did you just call to tell us that?
Oh, I wish that's all, but no, I want to talk to you fellas.
Okay.
No, I hope you two are having a wonderful day. My question,
Thank you.
Jimmy, is the great warning or the illumination of conscience. Now, I've only been Catholic since April, so of course I'm still learning, but here recently...
Congratulations.
I noticed... Well, thank you very much. Feels good to be home, if I must say.
Yeah.
So the illumination of conscience has come up on my YouTube because I watch a lot of you, Trent Horn, Joe Heschmeyer, a bunch of apologetics, and I don't understand it. I was hoping maybe if anybody could help me figure it out or understand, it'd be you.
Okay, well, I'll give you a brief answer now because that's all I have time for. But then I'm going to recommend something that is a more in-depth resource. So the idea of a great warning or an illumination of conscience is an event that you read about in various Catholic prophetic circles. The basic idea is that at some point in our future, God is going to give every person on earth insight into the spiritual state of their soul. This will be a brief event. Some sources say it'll be like 15 minutes, but basically God's going to show everyone what spiritual state they're in. And this will help many people, but not everybody, repent. And it'll have various consequences, the details of which vary depending on which source you're listening to. And it's considered to be by the people who proposed this idea, it's considered to be a major upcoming prophetic event, which you would expect if it affects the entire world. Well, I've done a sort of a deep dive into this subject, looking for what's the evidence for it. And I have to say the evidence is not good. You will hear people claiming that the warning or the illumination of conscience has been predicted by various famous figures, and you check and it just wasn't predicted by those figures. It also, there are doubts about some of the sources that are claimed to talk about it, and really where you find the most discussion of it is in unapproved apparitions that the church has not certified as being credible. And so you've got a bunch of what it looks like from the outside is a lot of less credible apparition sources having a kind of collective herd mentality promoting this idea, but you do not find this idea promoted in those apparitions that the church has looked into and certified as credible. So I think the evidence for this is quite problematic, and some versions of this theory are more problematic than others. I don't have any problem if God wants to do this. I think it'd be great for everyone in the world to have insight into their spiritual state. I think that'd be awesome. I just don't find credible evidence that we should expect this as a major upcoming prophetic event. If you'd like more information about this, I did a whole episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World on it. It's episode 122, and you can find it by going to mysterious.fm/122. Or you could go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy Akin, and search the channel for Warning or Illumination of Conscience, and it'll pop right up for you.
Okay, Wayne?
That sounds great, Jimmy. I thank you very much. I hope both you gentlemen have a wonderful evening.
You too, Wayne. God bless you. Thank you so much for the call. Off we go to Stafford, Virginia, where Jonathan is listening on the Catholic Answers app. Glad to have you here, Jonathan. I will tell you we're getting near the top of the hour, so if you can be kind of quick with the question, you'll give Jimmy a chance at an answer.
Sure thing, no problem. How are y'all doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Wonderful. I just had a quick question about the early church fathers. I'm still a neophyte. I just came to the church during Easter Vigil, and I've been
Congratulations.
really reading about the early church. Thank you very much. That was actually Catholic Answers that really helped me out, so I appreciate you all very much.
Beautiful, thank you.
Absolutely. So I guess I wanted to know where I could start reading some of the early church fathers, where I could find out some resources about them, and then because there's so many, which one should I start with?
Well, I the answer to which one should you start with will depend on what you're interested in. But it also presupposes a prior question, prior issue, which is that you start with just one. My inclination, if you're looking for basic familiarity with the church fathers and what they have to say, is don't start with just one. And Cy Kellett, I want to give away a book here. Since
I thought you might.
He is here in the United States, we can send it to him. But I wrote a book called The Fathers Know Best, and it's a collection of quotations from the early church fathers on almost 50 topics. And they're organized chronologically, so you can trace the development of thought on an issue from earlier times in church history to later times. It also contains extensive material introducing the church fathers and the world in which they lived. So you can like read mini biographies of them and things like that. And I would suggest, looking around in The Fathers Know Best and seeing what you're interested in and what strikes your fancy, and then you can use the references in The Fathers Know Best to read more by the church fathers after you've determined what you're most interested in. So I think it's, in general, when you're starting to study a subject, it's good to begin with an overview. And so if you hang on the phone line, we'll send you the overview that I wrote known as The Fathers Know Best.
Hang on. You're going to hear the music play, but you just stay on that line, and Edgar will get an address where we can send that off to you. Jonathan, thank you very much for the call. Boy, the line stayed really full. And I realized, I just realized I never asked Jimmy about his podcast. We got a lot of stuff to talk about the next hour. We'll find out what's dropping on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World today and what dropped earlier in the week on the Jimmy Akin podcast. And exactly one line open right now. So if you've got a question, you can ask whatever you want. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's Ask Me Anything, and there is exactly one line open, 888-318-7884. You can ask whatever you like. And I don't know. I lost my mind. I forgot. Jimmy told me it's 2 weeks in a row now. I didn't ask him about his podcast in the first hour. I know why it is. It's because the YouTube department here is like pushing me. Get a good solid question in the first hour, and then I get nervous and I get my question.
An opener question at the beginning of the first hour.
And then I'm like relieved that I got it out, and then I forget that Jimmy produces a lot of content, and I just blow right past it. So what dropped today on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
Well, today I presented on Mysterious World, I presented a talk that I actually gave earlier this summer at a Christian parapsychology conference. There are Christian parapsychologists, I'm one of them, and they have organizations, and one of them had a conference earlier this summer, and a bunch of people gave talks at it, and I gave one of the talks. The particular talk I gave was about spirit communication. Now, some people, as soon as they hear that phrase, their spider sense goes off. But let's think about this for a second. You know, is it okay for Christians to communicate with spirits? Well, Psychelid. In John chapter 4, Jesus has a conversation with the woman at the well. And he says God is something, and he wants people who worship him in something and in truth. What word goes in the place of something? God is...
I'm not even going to look this up. I'm just going to go by memory. Spirit.
Yeah, God is spirit, and he wants those who will worship him in spirit and in truth.
Yeah.
So, second question, Psychelid, is it okay to communicate with God?
It is. It's highly encouraged.
Yeah, like praying to him and stuff like that. And if he talks back and reveals himself to you, should you respond, or should you stick your fingers in your ears and goes, la, 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 I'm not talking to you, God?
Do not do the latter. Strongly discouraged by the church fathers.
Okay. Now, how about another kind of spirit? Because there are created spirits like angels. Is it okay to communicate with an angel? Like when Gabriel shows up to tell Mary she's going to be the mother of the Messiah, is it okay for Mary to communicate with Gabriel? Or should she stick her fingers in her ears and go, la, 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 I'm not going to communicate with you, Gabriel?
I actually know for a fact that everything Mary did is okay. Because she never did anything that's not okay.
So it was okay for Mary to communicate with an angelic spirit.
Right.
Okay. How about the spirits of departed humans, like saints? Can you communicate with saints, Psychelid?
I can, yes. Yeah,
you could ask them to intercede for you.
Exactly.
And let's suppose one of the saints shows up to you in a vision, like, I mean, she actually had her body at this point, but let's suppose Mary showed up to you in a vision, or some other saint, and they talk to you. Can you talk to them back, or do you have to stick your fingers in your ears and go, la, 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 I'm not talking to you?
The fingers in the ears, la, 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 is just strongly discouraged. It's okay to talk.
Yeah, okay. And then there's this passage in 1 John 4 where John says, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits and see whether they're of God. Okay. If a spirit shows up, what are you supposed to do according to 1 John 4, Psychelid?
Test them.
Can you test them if you stick your fingers in your ears and go, la, 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 I'm not talking to you?
You cannot. You cannot test them that way.
So we see that there are robust forms of spirit communication that are not only permitted, but expected for Christians, including talking with spirits who you're not sure who they are, like the ones that 1 John 4 deals with, the ones you're supposed to test. So that was the substance of what my talk at the Christian Parapsychology Conference was, but there's lots more detail, and I go into other options, possibilities that are there too, and what the Christian faith would have to say about them.
Oh, very, very good. Check it out at mysterious.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. You can go wherever or you can go to Jimmy's YouTube channel. It's up and running and very popular YouTube channel. Check out Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Hundreds of, I can say that for reals, hundreds of episodes now available. And,
almost 400. We've got episode
really?
400 coming up in January.
Coming up on 4. And so that, I guess that's about 4 years worth of work.
8 years worth of work, given that there's 50 weeks in a year.
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant. I don't know. Oh, man. Why do I all right, we're going back. We're going to the phones while I lick my wounds. Rob is in Green Bay, Wisconsin, watching on YouTube. Thanks for starting us off this hour, Rob. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Cy and Jimmy, for taking my call, and may God truly bless you both.
Thank you.
I hope these are worthy questions. I just got two quick ones. One's on the Gospel of John, chapter 7, where Jesus goes up to the Feast of the Tabernacles. And in verse 8, he says that he's not going to the feast, but then in verse 10, it says he goes up to the feast. So it almost appears like he did told a fib. And I wanted to get some clarification on that so I can better explain that to people that might question me on that. And then my second question is much more important to me as a neophyte apologist. I would like to know if Jimmy has a single source for good typology from Old to New Testament, so that I really get a lot of motivation from seeing how God has written his whole story of redemption throughout history, and I really like to share that with people. But the sources I've had are kind of fragmented, and it's hard to compile everything together.
Okay, well, let's deal with the second question first, so I don't have to end on a disappointed note. The answer is I don't have such a resource I can recommend. The reason I don't is because I don't focus on typology. I mean, I'm aware of typology, and in particular, I'm aware of it when it is used and called out in the Bible. You know, like Jesus, or even not called out, but like Matthew presents Jesus as a fulfillment of Moses. He's like a greater Moses. And it's fair to point that out, but my focus is almost exclusively on typology that can be identified from the Bible alone. And the reason for that is because I'm a biblical student. I seek to interact with the Bible in a scholarly way, and this is something that the Bible clearly does. In fact, terms like type appear in the Bible. So it's part of my biblical studies to know about that. But I don't use it, because you mentioned apologetics, I don't really use it in my apologetic work. I need to be able to answer questions about typology, but I don't go to people and say, here's this piece of typology, and you ought to believe X because of that. Because, as St. Thomas Aquinas pointed out, all of the typology operates in the Bible, operates in the spiritual sense of the text, and not the literal sense of the text. And you can't prove something to a person who doesn't already believe it by appealing to the spiritual sense of the text. It's better to do what I call bulletproof in your apologetics, which means not using the weaker arguments, only using the strong arguments, which are the ones that are directly based on the literal sense of the text. So Aquinas says, and I agree, you don't try to prove doctrine by appealing to the spiritual sense of the text. There can be value in exploring the spiritual sense of the text, including typology that it contains, but it's not something I recommend for apologists to do. If you want to study typology because you're interested in it and you like discussing it with other people, that's great. I just don't have a resource I can recommend, because I have to prioritize what do I study, and that's not of value for my work as an apologist, because I need to stick to arguing based on the literal sense of the text in order to convince people of things they're not yet convinced of. For people who are already convinced of something, typology can serve as a reinforcement, but it's much harder to prove something if it's part of the spiritual sense of a text and is thus debatable. So I'm sorry I have a disappointing answer on that question, but that's where I'm at on that. When it comes to your when it comes to your first question, so you're right that in John 7, 8, Jesus, there's this major Jewish feast, the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths coming up, and Jesus's brethren recommend to him that he goes up to the feast and display himself. And in reply, he says, "You go up to the feast. I'm not going up to this feast, for my time is not yet fully come." But then two verses later, we read, "But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in private." So how can we explain that? Well, there would be several possibilities. 3 of them leap to mind. The first one would be the one that you mentioned: Jesus lied or told a fib, in your words. That's problematic because Jesus is the all-holy Son of God, and we wouldn't expect him to ever lie. Certainly, we wouldn't expect for him to use deception in a way that was morally illegitimate. And so if you wanted to defend the idea that Jesus told a fib here, you'd have to articulate some theory of fibbing that would allow him to do this without violating his holiness, and that's a tall order. So it doesn't look like this first option is too promising as an explanation. A second option, which would be better, would be to say Jesus changed his mind. Now, that of itself is going to cause some people to stumble, because isn't he the all-knowing, all-holy God who shouldn't have to change his mind? Well, in his divine mind, which is changeless and omniscient, sure. And in his divine mind, he wouldn't have actually changed it. But in his human mind, which is within time and does change, like when Luke says he grew in wisdom as a child, that implies some kind of change happening in Jesus's mind. Also, it's obvious other things are changing too, because at one moment he's directing his body with his human mind. He's directing his body to do one thing, and at another moment in his human mind, he's directing his body to do another thing. So there's clearly change going on in Jesus's mind. The question would be, can we come up with a theory that would allow him to change his mind about something like going up to the feast, so that originally he planned not to go to the feast, but then he did? And I think that there's at least a possibility here. It's more promising than the first theory, the lion theory that we looked at. I think there's a possibility here, at least a possibility of articulating such a theory, which would involve circumstances changing. That early on, when the brothers recommended that he go up to the feast, circumstances were such that it did not warrant him going up. But then later, circumstances changed and it did warrant him going up. And so that's a possible way of explaining why he would indicate one course of action and then ultimately follow in another course of action. It was because circumstances changed. The problem with this theory is there's nothing in the text to indicate that circumstances had changed. So that's a strike against this second theory, which brings up a third theory. The third theory is a mental reservation theory. And the idea here would be, when Jesus said he was not going to go up, he meant something different than what people took him to mean, that he mentally reserved part of what he was intending, and he just didn't disclose that. And what he meant by "I'm not going up" was, I'm not going up publicly. And this third theory has a basis in the text, because in John 7:10, John he calls out the fact that Jesus went up privately, not publicly. And the obvious reason textually why he would include that phrase would be to explain this apparent shift in behavior on Jesus's part. So when Jesus spoke to his brethren and said, I'm not going up, what he meant was, I am not going up publicly. But in fact, he was planning on going up privately. And it seems to me that that's the best explanation of the three we've covered, because it actually has traction. It has a basis in the text of John's gospel itself. If Jesus had just changed his mind or had been lying or something like that, then it's harder to see why John would have included this phrase about, but he went up privately, not publicly. John, like any author, expects us to relate that phrase to what has just come before, and its obvious meaning would seem to be, this explains why Jesus said one thing to his brethren but went up anyway. It's because he was mentally reserving the fact he was going to go up privately. He was not going to go up and make a huge spectacle of himself the way his brothers recommended. Now, he did, once he got there, end up making something of a spectacle of himself, but not in the full way that his brothers were anticipating, because, as Jesus said, his time was not yet fully come. And so he reserved the final big reveal until his final visit to Jerusalem during his last Passover.
And I tell you what, Rob, I'm going to leave it there because I'm a little late for the break. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
This is Jim Pinto, Director of EWTN Media Missionaries. EWTN Media Missionaries prayerfully take EWTN to parishes and the community through the print and electronic media we provide. You can help EWTN share the good news by becoming a media missionary. Visit EWTNmissionaries.com today and join us in sharing the eternal word with the world.
Jimmy Akin is our guest, and it's Ask Me Anything. You can ask him anything. You're going to have to wait for a line to open up. We've got them all full at the moment. And so back to the phones I will go, and we're going to Milton, Florida, where Alicia is listening on the Catholic Answers app. Welcome, Alicia. Got a question for Jimmy?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Hello, Jimmy.
Howdy.
I just had a question about intercession of the saints. I come from a Protestant background, a Baptist background, both me and my husband, and we're coming into the church next month.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But I had a question. I know about asking the saints to pray for you, and we're both okay with that. We both do it. But I've noticed that sometimes prayers to the saints tend to go beyond just asking for prayer, but asking them to say, like, Saint Anthony to help you find something, or a guardian angel to protect you. It's not just asking them to pray for you. So my question is, what is acceptable and what isn't?
Okay, well, what I would say would be unacceptable would be asking a saint to do something when we have good evidence that they don't do that thing. But as long as you understand the prayer in a way that is compatible with whatever God allows the saints to do, I don't think it matters particularly what words you use. For example, if someone says, St. Anthony, help me find my lost car keys, then that can be understood in more than one way. It could be understood in terms of St. Anthony, will you St. Anthony, guide me to find my car keys? Or it could be understood as St. Anthony, will you help me find my car keys by asking God to help me find my car keys? And understood that way, there clearly wouldn't be any problem, because all you're doing is asking St. Anthony to pray to God for you. Now, it so happens that God hadn't told us a lot about exactly what the saints are allowed to do in heaven. We know they're allowed to pray to him. That's something that even the Bible talks about, but because there are passages that talk about the heavenly saints praying to God. So we know they're allowed to do that. Whether they're allowed to do something else, like, drop a little hint into your consciousness to say, hey, look under the couch or whatever to find your car keys, that's something we don't know whether God allows them to do or not. So I would say that as long as you're open to whatever God wants in this situation, whether he wants St. Anthony to help you by praying to him, or whether he wants St. Anthony to help you by telepathically giving you a hint that the car keys are under the couch, as long as you leave it up to God to decide what he wants to happen, you're submitting to God's will in this prayer. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with the prayer. It would only be if you knew that something was not God's will and you prayed for it anyway, that it would become wrong. So as long as you're open to letting God fulfill this request, however God determines, you're fundamentally submitting to God's will, and I'm not seeing a problem with it, regardless of the specific language that's used, because language can be used in all kinds of different ways, and it frequently is not literal. We frequently use non-literal expressions all the time. So even if it sounds like you're asking St. Anthony to do something himself, it doesn't have to be taken literally. Now, if you spelled it out, though, and said, St. Anthony, help me find my car keys, I mean you, not God, well, okay, that's getting to be problematic, especially if you have evidence that God has not allowed St. Anthony. But even if you didn't have that evidence, rejecting God's providence is a problem. And so a prayer like that would be problematic on those grounds.
Okay.
All right.
Also, I think there may be you mentioned guardian angels guarding us, and I think there may be a special exception for guardian angels in this regard, because if they're guardian angels, they should do guard duty. And so if you're saying, guardian angel, protect me, well, God may allow them to do that. Now they're not technically called guardian angels in Scripture, so you could challenge it. What Jesus says is the angels of these little ones never fail to see the face of my Father in heaven, which means they have guaranteed access to intercede with God. They have guaranteed access to God to intercede for those under their care. So you could say, by guardian angel, protect me. You could, if God allows them to do guard duty, literally punch a demon in the face or whatever to keep them away from you. Your prayer can be understood that way, but it can also be understood in terms of the guardian angel prays for you, and that's how he guards you. So the situation with guardian angels may be a bit different than with human saints, but as long as you're open to letting God fulfill the request however God chooses, you're fundamentally submitting to God's will, and it's not going to be a problem.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Carla Broussard put out a book this year called The Saints Pray for You. So if you would like a copy of that, I'd be happy to send you that. Just give us an address. We will send it off to you. Jimmy Akin, our guest. All right. Well, Jimmy, let me ask you this now that I got a minute here. What about the Jimmy Akin podcast? What's happening over there?
Well, this last week I had an episode come out on what is heresy. So that was this Monday's episode. People throw around the charge of heresy a lot these days, and very clearly many of them do not understand what the term even means. So I talk about what it means and how to identify heresy, and there's actually a lot less heresy than you might think, because what heresy is a refusal to believe a dogma of the church, and there aren't as many dogmas as people think there are. Coming up on Mysterious World on the Jimmy Akin podcast this next Monday, I'm going to be looking at the synoptic problem, which is the question of how the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke are related to each other, because those three Gospels are very similar, and there needs to be some kind of explanation for why they're so similar compared to, say, John's Gospel. And that's what the synoptic problem is, and I go through the different options that have been proposed on it.
You really do have to visit the Jimmy Akin page or channel over there on YouTube. All kinds of great stuff, including the Jimmy Akin podcast. Right back with more questions on Catholic Answers Live.
Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. There's the groovy music. Jimmy Akin's our guest, and you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. A couple lines just opened up, so I will encourage you to call. If you've got a question, you can ask Jimmy whatever you like today, 888-318-7884. Unfortunately, Carrie, who writes the ads for the show, has discovered ChatGPT, and I can guarantee, well, I think I can't guarantee, but I think the prompt for today was write an ad in the Halloween spirit. Let's see if you think I got that right. Hey there, ghoul friend. Creep on over to shop.catholic.com because we're brewing up some spookalicious savings that'll raise the spirits of every book lover this Halloween. Get this, every last item in our haunted halls is on sale. Every Jimmy Akin book and all the other books. But beware, the deals don't rest in peace. We've got fresh sales rising from the grave. Every day, it's absolutely fantastic. So don't ghost us, friend. Fly over to shop.catholic.com before these deals vanish into the mist.
I think Carrie must be taking some kind of delight in you having to read that.
Who told him about ChatGPT? It's only a few years from retirement. No one had to tell him.
I assume the prompt wasn't in the Halloween spirit, but something like, shove in as many Halloween-related puns as you can.
That's probably right, yes. I particularly liked Fangtastic. I don't know why. I particularly liked Fangtastic. Oh, well, let's see what he cooks up for next week.
You know what I was watching today, a little bit of earlier? You may remember this. I'm sure that the other folks in the studio are less likely to, but you and I may have both seen this. Back when I was a kid, I remember when I was 5 years old, I would come home every day and watch a particular soap opera that was on the air.
Oh, I think I know what you mean.
And the soap opera was named Dark Shadows.
Yes.
It was it was billed as a gothic soap opera, but very quickly it started to involve vampires and Frankensteins and all kinds of other monsters. And so it was like, wow, come home from preschool and get to watch monsters on TV. Of course I'm into that.
Yeah.
And just today, coincidentally, I happened to see a little bit of old Dark Shadows video. So that was kind of Halloween related. Yeah.
Yeah. They probably shot it on videotape that didn't hold up very well, I bet.
The quality is not modern, but you can still tell what's going on.
Dark Shadows.
You know, a lot of
they lived in New England, I think.
The first season, it was set in the state of Maine.
Oh, yeah.
In Collinsport, Maine, and the original season in 1966, for almost a year, they were in black and white.
Oh yeah, because daily television was the last thing. Like daily shows were the last ones to flip over. Yeah, do you remember how excited they would be? They'd put that little thing at the beginning of the show in color. Yeah,
or in living color.
Or in living color, right? Yeah.
And one thing that was interesting about Dark Shadows is even though this was the late 60s and early 70s, I think it went off the air in 71. But it was early 70s. And pop culture really didn't have a lot of science fiction concepts in it, especially the housewives who stayed home and watched, you know, soap operas. But they included parallel universe storylines.
No way.
Yeah,
really?
they did. They didn't use a term like multiverse or parallel timeline, but what they did was they talked about, like, in the mansion that the soap opera, the main family in the soap opera was set in, you could go through it a certain way and end up in parallel time where events had unfolded differently. And it's just an alternate timeline or another, timeline in the multiverse. Those phrases were not yet well known, so they talked about it as parallel time. And they were doing multiverse stories on Dark Shadows, on soap operas, so that's pretty cool. In fact, when they got canceled, they were actually doing an extended parallel time story. So they ended up in parallel time and never got back home to main time.
Oh, no. Yeah, Dark Shadows with 60s were so awesome. So much cool TV. I don't remember the name of the TV show, but there were Land of the Giants, I think. I liked that one.
Yeah, that was was that Irwin Allen?
Well, they would have to answer a giant phone in one episode, get off of a giant chair in another episode. Yeah, that was probably Irwin Allen, of Towering Inferno fame.
Go into another planet where everything was giant by comparison.
Everyone was the same. They were just giant.
Yeah.
888-318-7884. The number. Natalie's up in Fullerton, California, watching on Facebook. Oh, Time Tunnel, too. Sorry, Natalie. I'll talk about that.
Oh, Time Tunnel was great.
Natalie, go ahead. I got excited.
Well, my husband just handed me the phone.
Oh, okay.
What did you want me to say?
What's your question?
Oh, okay. I am I guess my husband calls me a Protestant. I didn't even really think I was a Protestant until I did some research.
Okay.
My husband is Catholic. My kids go to Catholic school. I'm surrounded by Catholics. My husband wants me to come Catholic. I'm okay. The Eucharist part, I do believe we kind of take it in remembrance, but I'm okay with it being like the body. That's a great thing if it really is true, right? The whole thing with Mary being sinless is hard for me to get past because I just feel like it's putting Mary on the same level as God because God is perfect.
Okay. Well, let's explore this idea a little bit. So right now, Mary's up in heaven, right? I mean, you
I
don't think
believe she
Mary
is, yeah,
went.
absolutely.
You don't think she went to hell, right, or anything?
Yeah, I think she's in heaven, absolutely. But,
Okay.
you know, that's for God
So-
to decide. But yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we assume that Mary's in heaven, is she a sinner right now?
In heaven?
Yeah.
I think we're sinless in heaven.
Okay, so we're sinless in heaven. That would mean we're perfect, right?
In heaven, yeah.
In heaven, yeah. But I thought you said, and I'm not making fun of you here, I'm just trying to think through this issue with you. You know, didn't you say that only God is perfect?
Yeah, on earth. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, but God's not on earth.
Well, he did come to earth.
Well, in the incarnation he did. But so let me make one point, and then I'll move to the next part of this consideration. So
Okay.
if Mary is sinless now, and because she's in heaven, and how long has she been in heaven? What century did she go to heaven?
Oh, I don't know that.
Well, Jesus lived in which century?
I don't know that.
Oh, okay. Well, it's easy. It's the 1st century. That's how we date our years. Is the 1st century is when Jesus lived, and of course when his mother Mary lived. So you know, so she would have, given a normal human lifespan, she would have gone to heaven sometime in the 1st century. And that would mean, since it's now the 21st century, that Mary has been in heaven and thus sinless for about 2,000 years. So Mary has been sinless for 2,000 years, even on your own proposal. So any period of time that she was on earth is going to be very small compared to the last 2,000 years, because people don't live for even 100 years. So so she's been sinless for the vast majority of the time she has existed. But you raise a good point about being on earth. Okay, let's talk about that. And here I'm going to pull in Cy Kellett
Here I
for some
go.
additional assistance.
All right.
Cy Kellett, excluding Jesus,
yes,
and excluding Mary,
yes,
can you think of anyone who ever, even temporarily, was sinless when they were on earth?
Angels?
Humans.
Oh, humans? Oh man, I'm stumped here. Like little
Think back. Think way.
Oh, Adam and
back.
Eve.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
So God created Adam and Eve in a state where they had no sin. They later fell into sin, much to their shame and our detriment. But originally, they were in a state of perfection too. They didn't have to choose to sin. So, it's not the case that being perfect makes you equal to God. So, Natalie, was Adam equal to God?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
But I still think, okay, great point.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yes, you're right. If people believe Mary was sinless, then maybe it doesn't put them on the same level of God. She doesn't have the power and stuff like that. So thank you, because that actually made me feel a little bit better.
Good.
Still, though, why do some Catholics, which they do, I think, some still don't believe that she was, like human, right? And a lot of the Catholic Church believes she was sinless while she was a human. Can you explain the difference? And do you believe that the church is divided on that, or is that like they all believe Mary was sinless while she was human here on earth?
Well, okay, I want to make sure I understand what you're asking, because I want to give you the best answer I can. The Catholic Church teaches in a very solemn way that Mary was sinless throughout her entire life, both on earth and in heaven. Now, there are Catholics who don't believe that, but there are also Catholics who are just cultural Catholics who don't believe any number of things. They may not even believe that Jesus rose from the dead, or that God is a Trinity, or things like that. And that's because people are imperfect, and sometimes they're badly educated in their faith. Sometimes they choose to reject doctrines that they've seen evidence for, but they just don't want to believe them. And that's not unique to the Catholic Church. That's, every church. There are people who are members of the Presbyterian Church and the Baptist Church and the Pentecostal Church and every church who reject various teachings of their faith. And that applies to the Catholic Church just like any other, because we're all humans. But the Catholic Church wants to articulate what it understands the truth to be, and it has articulated or taught that Mary was, by God's grace, in order to make her a more fitting mother for Jesus, preserved her from every stain of sin. And not just to make her a more fitting mother for Jesus, but to show us what his grace can do with human nature. So it's not just something that is unique to Mary. He's going to make all of us free of sin. He's going to, at least if we die in God's friendship, we're not going to be sinners for eternity. God is going to make us just as holy as Mary. We're going to be just as pure. He's going to remove every stain of sin from our souls. And so we can look forward to that. And Mary gives us an example of what God's grace can do for us. So she's also a sign of hope, in addition to being a more fitting mother for the Son of God. Unfortunately, not everybody knows that or believes that, either because they were miseducated or because they've made choices they shouldn't. But that's the fundamental answer. Is that helpful, or did I not quite understand your question correctly?
Yeah, that's helpful. A last thing is, Mary was born sinless, but was Mary born of a sinner?
Yes,
that's her parents.
That's the standard understanding. The reason that Mary was the primary reason that Mary was born without sin was to make her a better mother for Jesus. But Mary is not the son or daughter of God herself, so she didn't need a parent who was sinless. And Jesus didn't need one either. God could have picked a prostitute and sent the word. He's omnipotent. He can do whatever he chooses. So he could have picked a sinful woman, even a very sinful woman, but he chose to pick one who was holy and made holy in a special way by his grace, because it was more fitting to give the all-holy Son of God and a mother who had an extraordinary level of holiness too.
So in other words, she was kind of like an angel in a way, but human form. Yeah,
well, she was definitely human. She was just an exceptionally holy human.
Got it. And then the Catholic Church came up with this based on her being full of grace and just stuff that they found out in the Bible, right?
And also material that was passed down through the Church Fathers. We have Church Fathers reflecting on Mary's holiness very early on. In some documents that deal with that come from the first century. There are early Christian documents outside the New Testament, but they preserve ideas from the first century Christian community. And then as the Holy Spirit led the church into greater reflection, the church's understanding of these matters got deeper. For example, originally there was no term original sin. That term came later as people reflected on the idea of Adam's sin and how that relates to us. And then that raised the question of, well, if Mary's very holy, is she subject to original sin the way we are? And the church was eventually led to conclude, no, that's inconsistent with the holiness that God gave her. So it's not just based on the Bible. There is additional information that was passed down from the apostolic community via what's known as apostolic tradition, or tradition that comes from the apostles.
Natalie, I wish we could just talk and keep answering questions. I have to take a break, but we can keep answering questions. We have a book from Jimmy Akin called A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. And there's lots of questions with one-page answers in the book about the Catholic faith. I hope you will call again, but in the meantime, if you'd like the book, just hang on the line. We'll get an address, and we will send it out to you and be to you next week. Got to take a break. Right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because, if you look in the Catechism, you will see the fruits of Holy Communion. And these are remarkable things that we can receive at every Mass that we attend. We encounter the risen Lord, and he shares something of his divine life and love with us.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, Jimmy Akin, our guest. I'm going to go straight to the phones, try to get as many on as I can. We'll start with Jeff in Indiana, listening on Catholic.com. Jeff, if you could be kind of quick with your question, we'll get you an answer.
Yeah, sure. So I was looking in the Moody Bible Commentary, and in their portion on John 6, the Bread of Life Discourse, they mention that the phrase, "He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood," can't refer to the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper. And the first reason they give is because John paid very little attention to sacraments, and they mention that the Lord's Supper is never mentioned in his book. And I hadn't really encountered that before, so I wasn't really sure how to respond to that from a Catholic perspective.
Well, I would say a couple of things. The first one is John is extraordinarily interested in the sacraments, especially baptism and the Eucharist. There are prominent discussions of both of these, one of them being John 6, but also earlier in John 3, we have a discussion, among other places, we have a discussion of baptism. The second thing, so I think it's simply a mistake to say John is not interested in these things. In the case of John 6, that's also assuming what you're trying to prove. But that's a problematic move, because there's a second fact about John's gospel that whoever made this comment is failing to take into account, and that is the fact that John has what I refer to as supplemental intent. John, unlike the three synoptic gospels, is written late. John clearly knows Mark, and he clearly not quite as clearly knows Luke. He may have also known Matthew, but it's very clear he knows the synoptic tradition, because if you're, not only does the structure of his gospel interlock with the structure of the Gospel of Mark. And I have, if you go to my website, jimmyakin.com, I have an essay there about that. But he also does refer to things that are part of the synoptic gospels that John mentions but never follows up on. Like early on, after the discussion of baptism, John is talking about John the Baptist, and he says this was before John the Baptist was put in prison. And he never mentions John the Baptist being put in prison again. It's just this one little reference that he's dropped in out of the blue. And so what that tells us is John expects you to already know the synoptic tradition in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where we're told about John the Baptist being put in prison. So it's like that's already out there, that's in the record, so John may refer to it, but he doesn't dwell on it because that story's already been told to the Christian community in the synoptic gospels. Also, we have at the end of John's gospel a reference to why he has included the specific material he has. He says it's to encourage belief, and he says Jesus did all kinds of stuff I'm not even talking about, and he hyperbolically says if they were all written down, I suspect the world would not contain the books. that would have to be written. So there's a little bit, what this fits with is a claim in the early church fathers that John was initially reluctant to write his gospel because Matthew, Mark, and Luke had already been written, but he was eventually persuaded to do it because he had knowledge that had not been recorded. And he's saying, hey, there's even more where there's no way I could record it all. So I did this selection to help you. Then there's the fact that the Gospels are all written to the same size. Scrolls, which was the standard form of book in the first century, have a maximum length. You can't bind, for example, the whole Bible in a book. If you did, then when you're halfway through, the two ends would be so heavy it would rip in the middle, and the book would be ruined. So books in the form of scrolls had a maximum length. And each of the four Gospels is designed to fill a scroll. What that means, and scrolls were fantastically expensive. Like a single copy of Matthew would cost the equivalent of more than $2,000 in today's money. So given that, you wanted to keep your biography of Jesus short and just to keep it to the size of one scroll, because even that's going to be phenomenally expensive. You're not going to get individual people, unless they're rich, to buy multi-scroll collections. And so that means there's price pressure to keep your gospel short, and that means there's pressure to leave out stuff that has already been written about so that you can include the new stuff, which is what John is trying to do. He is intending to supplement what's in the other Gospels. And that's why I say John has supplemental intent. Well, Psych-Elliott.
Yes.
In the three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, how many of them talk about the Last Supper and the Eucharist?
All three.
All three, yeah. So if from John's perspective, the institution of the Eucharist at the Last Supper has already been told to the Christian community 3 times. So what you don't need to spend space on is just repeating that story again. What you would want to do is go deeper into the theology of it and its significance for Christians, which is exactly what John is doing in John chapter 6. He's indicating Jesus is really serious about, you've got to eat my flesh and drink my blood or you're not going to have life in you. This is not, so he's bringing out the significance of the Eucharist for Christians. And the idea that he could be using this language in it to have no relation with the Eucharist when Jesus himself introduced a ceremony into the Christian church that Jesus himself described as eating his flesh and drinking his blood, and someone wants to propose John 6 has no relationship to that, that is whack, as the kids used to say. And even most Christians like Lutherans and Anglicans and Methodists recognize that, yeah, Jesus is talking about the Eucharist in John 6. He's not repeating the institution narrative because that's already been told 3 times. John needs to keep his gospel to the size of one scroll. So what he wants to do is go deeper into the significance of the Eucharist for the Christian life rather than just repeat the institution narrative again.
What do you think? Oh, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's kind of the route that I was thinking we would go, and I thought I had some rebuttals that a Protestant would probably bring up, but you answered those too, so I think that's good. I like that. Thank you.
Great.
Jimmy, I feel like I've read some of this. You wrote some of this at Jimmy Akin at your website, or no?
I've written about John's supplemental intent.
Yeah. So, and that's, if I'm correct, jimmyakin.com.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah.
Yep.
Maybe check there, Jeff.
Yep, frequent flyer there, yep.
You're frequent flyer there. I don't know if you get any bonus miles for frequent use of jimmyakin.com, but thank you. I'll tell you what, I don't know if you're a frequent flyer there, you might have a Daily Defense, but if you don't have it, we'd be happy to send it to you. Just tell Edgar your address. The Daily Defense, 365 days plus 1 to becoming a better apologist, one of Jimmy Akin's many books. Jimmy, I certainly enjoyed the hour. Thank you, or 2 hours. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I am kind of sorry that I reduced your work by half. I didn't reduce I reduced your credit by half on the amount of work you've done at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Check out Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, mysterious.fm, wherever you get your podcasts, or at Jimmy Akin's YouTube page. It's not page, right? Channel. That's what we say now. And also, you'll find the Jimmy Akin podcast there. That will do it for us. We will see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.